Joining us today to take part in AeroTime's Women in Aviation campaign is Jill Meyers. She's an aerospace engineer, licensed pilot, Air Force veteran, and a mentor and advocate for students pursuing STEM subjects. After acquiring her pilot's license at the age of 17, she enlisted into the United States Air Force. During her enlistment, she was inspired by the 1981 space shuttle launch and decided to become an aerospace engineer. She went on to serve in senior positions in aviation and aerospace companies for more than 25 years. And for the last 20 years, she has channeled her passion to championing and supporting girls and young women in STEM programs. Jill, thank you for joining us here at AeroTime.
Oh, Michael, thank you so much for having me on. It's such an honor.
We don't get many female aerospace engineers, so I'm really delighted to be speaking to you. And really, your journey and aviation career is so fascinating and decorated, from receiving a number of accolades internationally. If I can mention one, being named as the top 62 women in aviation and aerospace to follow, as well as some of the exciting international projects that you do, around the world. It's really fascinating, and we're going to jump into that. But I think let's take it from the beginning, and we want to hear from you. What was the experience that got you into aviation?
Well, the very first aviation inspiring moment for me was when I was 12 years old, and we were visiting friends of my father's off the coast of Massachusetts. I'm from Philadelphia originally, so we used to go up and stay for a week or so during the summer with my dad's friend. And he owned an airplane, a small airplane, a Cessna 140. And one day he said, let's just go up in my airplane. We also went sailing that day, which I really was not a fan of. But it was a 1-hour flight in a tiny, tiny little Cessna at the age of 12 that really lit the initial bug in me. And I will never forget that flight. We flew up the coastline for a while and out over the ocean. And it was just incredibly inspiring. But what's interesting is when I look back on my younger childhood, I was building plastic models of airplanes and aircraft carriers when I was, 8 years old. So the bug, I think, was there all along, but I think that flight is what really lit the spark when I was 12.
So you caught the bug and the spark was lit, the fire was really burning. What then happened next? I mean, when did you then come into the industry?
So the story is I got my pilot's license. So I went up on this flight when I was 12. And at the time, we had just moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. And we lived about a mile from a small general aviation airport, the Scottsdale Municipal Airport, it was called back then. And I just started riding my bicycle to the airport and hanging out at the edge of the runway and watching the planes take off and land. And, it was like my thing to do after school and on weekends. And I did some research and figured out that you cannot get a pilot's license until you're 17. So I just kind of waited. I still hung out at the airport. Actually, at one point asked them if I could get a job like washing airplanes. And I was like 14 and they said no. But so when I was 17, literally when I turned 17, within a month, I started flying lessons, and I got my pilot's license when I was 17 in the middle of my senior year of high school. And I would have to fly at 5 a.m. to get up and down before school started at 7:30. And then I went to join the Air Force with my pilot's license, and they went, yeah, but you're a girl and we don't really do that yet. This was in the 1970s. And I was just a few years off, I was just a little off age-wise. But I decided to join the Air Force anyway, because I really wanted to travel. I really wanted to be around airplanes doing something. And I knew that when I figured out what I really wanted to do regarding college, that they would pay for that. So I joined the Air Force when I was 19 and ended up working on ground radar and communication systems. And then partway through, they approached me. I started taking night classes as soon as I got, on operational assignments. And then one day the education office called me in and said, there's a couple programs we'd like to talk to you about. And there's one in particular that I applied for and got in. And it was a really unique program where they paid for your college direct bill to the, so the school billed the Air Force directly. And I got to stay in uniform and be active duty Air Force and get paid. So they only took 5 people in the world in the year I applied for my specific degree. So I ended up getting my degree in astronautical engineering. And the spark that lit that, which you mentioned earlier, Michael, is I was already in the Air Force, knew I wanted to go to college, but wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do because I had immediately discarded pilot as an option. And the first space shuttle went up in 1981. And I watched that flight. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was just enamored with the space program. And I thought, well, maybe I can be an astronaut, not sure. But I knew that getting an aerospace engineering degree was the best path to either being able to become an astronaut or work on the actual vehicles that the space program was using. So that's how I got into aerospace engineering back in the early 80s.
Today, well, here at AeroTime, we've heard so many stories of, women and people who've, they started out wanting to become a pilot, and then they shifted to another role in aviation, and they seem to find more joy and fulfillment in that. Could you say that that's something you experienced after shifting to become an aerospace engineer?
I think it surprisingly is that way for me. And, thinking back, I mean, I flew privately for a while after that. I love flying. I still miss it. And I've flown a few times, in the past 40 years. But the aerospace engineering career in particular is so ridiculously exciting with all of the different things you can work on and all the amazing technologies being developed. And I think back and wonder what it would have been like had I proceeded on the path of becoming a professional pilot. And I actually think I'm on a better path for me, and that I'm having a heck of a lot more fun.
A lot of women that we've spoken to have shared stories where you mentioned your path and how that you became an aerospace engineer, but they also shared that there were some obstacles and they've encountered, barriers that really stood in between them and the progression of their career. Are there any obstacles that you ran into, and how did you face them and overcome them?
I had quite a few, unfortunately, although I'll say I think I had fewer than many women face in the industry. When I first joined the Air Force, as an example, my very first operational assignment was at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, and I was put into an organization of all what they call maintenance programmers. So we all worked on the underground command post for Strategic Air Command, which was an amazing, amazing thing to be involved in. But when I walked in my first day, it was literally a very large room of desks, and it was me and 45 guys. And I was also younger than many of them, having just been enlisted in the military. And I wasn't treated very well in that role. I had things happened that today they would call sexual harassment. They didn't back then. Minor stuff, nothing significant, practical jokes that were off color, things like that. And then once I got further into the Air Force, I was actually fine until I finished this college program. And the way it worked is I obviously joined as an enlisted member, not having a degree. And then when they put me through school, as soon as I graduated, I went to officers training school, which was a 12-week program, extremely rigorous. And having been prior military, of course, I was a leg up on a lot of the people there and had a fairly easy time in the beginning. And 2 weeks before graduation, I actually had an injury when I was running one of the physical fitness tests. And they used that one failure of the run test to throw me out of officer training school. And I know full well that the only reason I was thrown out is, again, I was the only female in the entire class. So when I went to OTS, it was me and 39 guys. And, I never had a problem with it. And I was not treated in a discriminatory way during the entire time I was there. But the commander of that organization literally sat in his office and all but admitted that it was a good excuse to, disenroll me was the word they used at the time, to throw me out. So they put me back to enlisted and wanted me to finish my career in the Air Force that way. But the Air Force rules are you can't be an engineer unless you're in an officer slot. So they just paid for this engineering degree and I was never going to be able to use it. So I said, no, I don't think that's the right thing. So I ended up leaving the Air Force. I ended up fighting for about a year and a half to get out after that. And I eventually did. So that was my first real big career impact of being a woman. And then as far as the aerospace engineering world itself, women are about 13% now of aerospace engineers, which is actually one of the few industries where the percentage of women has grown in the last 30 years. Most of them are fairly stagnant. And then once, much, much later in my career, there was a pay discrimination issue where I was paid about $40,000 less a year at a different aerospace company than all of my male peers. And when I asked human resources to confirm that, they not only said, yes, this is the case, they said, and we're not going to do anything about it. So we still have issues in our industry. The way I've dealt with them though, Michael, is to just, fight it as best I can without ruining my own career. And the message I have to women is you just have to really do what's best for you, but you have to have the strength to walk away if you need to, which a lot of people don't do.
Mm-hmm. At some points in your career, you stepped away, well, in 2017, and you've mentioned this earlier, that you stepped away from the corporate world and you had spent 4 years really supporting different companies and nonprofit organizations worldwide. But I want to touch into the exciting international work that you got into. To mention a few, in Botswana, the Dare to Dream program. There's Project Blue Angel, which is in Papua New Guinea, and Every Student Flies in Colorado. Could you tell us more about them and the passion that you've put behind them?
I will, yes. Thank you for asking about these exciting projects. I'll go backwards from your list. There is a flight school in Aspen, Colorado, that decided to run a program that we believe is the first one in the United States that is set up in this fashion, which is there's a flight school and there's a high school, a public high school. And the head of the board of directors at the time of the flight school, who is a full-time pilot for American Airlines, wanted to do something to really introduce and light that spark, as we talked about, of aviation to the kids in the school. So I was able to, they reached out to me through a mutual friend, and they ended up hiring me as a consultant to handle PR and media for the launch of a program called Every Student Flies. And what they were able to do is they were able to secure 2 small training aircraft from the company Diamond. The model was the DA-40, I believe. And they put together a program. They hired a flight director, a woman, by the way, to be the head of the program. And they offered a 2-hour flight lesson for absolutely no cost to every single student at that high school, which at the time was, I believe, 520 kids. And what's unique about the program is there are, I think I've counted over the years, maybe 6 or 7 high schools in the United States that have aviation programs embedded in the school. But I don't believe any one of them is a public high school. They're all private or charter, and the costs are covered somehow by their enrollment. But this is a public high school, and it was an amazing program. And we ended up getting international media, and it was just really crazy how it came out, and it's been a big success. They obviously had a little bit of impact from when COVID started and getting kids up in the air, but they've put quite a few kids who've left that high school as a senior with their private pilot license. And the other thing we did is we put together a whole package of information. So when the kids, because obviously not everyone's going to love it, right? So we decided that if kids went up and then came down and went, wow, that was incredible, I want to be an air traffic controller or a pilot or a mechanic, we gave them a whole packet of, for example, a matrix of every college in the country and who has which programs, and gave them some guidance on to what to do next. So I was really excited about that. So Blue Angel is a really fascinating project I could talk about all day, but we won't. I have to give a little bit of context though, or it won't make sense. So I've been connected with an amazing, amazing person who's become a dear friend of mine for many years, named Chris Williamson. And Chris runs a project called Chasing Earhart. And this project is to collaborate with all of the different teams of people around the world who are looking for Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan and their aircraft. As people may not know, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan disappeared on July 2nd, 1937, when she was toward the end of her attempt to fly around the world in a Lockheed Electra aircraft. And So Chris has been collaborating in different ways, trying to get the teams to work together. He put together a phenomenal panel in July of 2018, I believe, to pull together a bunch of experts and someone from every team looking for Amelia. And shortly after that panel, which I helped him pull some folks into, a gentleman named Bill Snavely called me and said, you know, Chris told me I should call you and I should hire you to help me. And I said, well, what's going on? So Bill Snavely is a retired gentleman on the East Coast of the United States who's was flying when he was younger, enamored with aviation and always enamored with Amelia. And again, long story short, he came across rumors of an aircraft wreckage at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of Papua New Guinea. And Amelia Earhart's last flight leg where she disappeared departed from New Guinea and was headed to a tiny island called Howland Island, which she never reached. So Bill had gone to this island called Buka, B-U-K-A, Buka Island. And sure enough, there is a twin engine 1940s, 50s-ish era, 1920s era aircraft down at the bottom of the ocean there. So he pulled teams together. He went out there with teams twice to dive down to that wreckage. And knowing that I had done some PR and media before in several projects I've worked on, and knowing that I have international reach, Bill did end up hiring me to help with PR and media. And I worked on that team for probably almost 2 years. And where we are now is we're a little bit dormant, partly because of COVID, but we have completed 2 dives down there. We have brought up samples of things that I can't talk about. They're all being analyzed by experts, and we're kind of still waiting, you know, for final results. But what's fascinating about Project Blue Angel is that former teams that have looked at this aircraft have already discarded options like it is definitely not a military frame. So if you look at how many civilian twin engine aircraft of that size, and it's been measured and everything, laying the bottom of Buka Island, it's really intriguing. So we're still on that project, which is really fun, and hopefully someday we'll be able to make an announcement, but we don't know. We don't know if we will ever know for sure. And then, yeah, Dare to Dream. So as you and I talked about before, Michael, there's a lot of things relating to the continent of Africa that keep coming to me. My karma, for some reason, I really need to get out there. So there's an amazing woman in Botswana named Kamoto Fatsima, and she goes by Fatsima. So Fatsima was one of the first women to fly in the Botswana Defense Force. Grew up in a very small village right outside of Gaborone, Botswana. And she was a pilot for, I think, about 10 years. And then she left the military to start a nonprofit called Dare to Dream. And Dare to Dream is amazing because what Fatsima's put together is an organization. They even have a facility. They're in a building called the Botswana Innovation Hub. And they run workshops for young kids. And it's everything from robotics to aviation to computer programming, but she teaches business skills, and I love that piece of it. So we all talk about the acronym STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math, and a lot of people add the A for arts. Well, Fatsima adds an E at the end for entrepreneurship, which again, I just love that piece of it because she is a businesswoman who has done amazing things with her life and to help the people in her community. So Fatsima and I have been on LinkedIn together for a few years, and she reached out to me last year and asked me if I would get on a Zoom call with her, and she wanted me to help her with something. So what it ended up being is she wants to take her program and expand it outside of Botswana. And the idea is we have a new program called Fly for STEAM, and Fly for STEAM is going to involve our team getting a hold of an aircraft, and we have one in mind. We're trying to find it. It'll hold between 10 and 14 people. And the idea is we would fly out of Botswana, we would fly to 5 of the surrounding countries one at a time, spend a few days in each country, and run a one-day workshop for 100 young girls, and it is girls only, in those countries to do these educational pieces, to have guest speakers, and really have it be educational and inspiring, also focused on aviation. And the idea is that we are planning on going to Angola, Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And we are now planning for September of next year, but obviously everything is going to, unfortunately, again, be related to how well we do with COVID-19. But we're super excited about this project, and I'm helping her put it together. I'm helping her get some in-kind sponsorship, meaning, companies that can assist us during the mission. It'll be roughly 3 to 4 weeks in total. So I'm super excited about that because, I've learned from not only knowing Fatsima, but I've been connected to the head of Women in Aviation International in Cameroon since 2015, I think we first met. And the more I meet women doing amazing things in Africa, I'm also now friends with one of the, I think, only 4 female pilots in Malawi, an amazing, amazing woman. I'm learning a lot, and as you well know, being from there, Michael, but girls in Africa really don't always have opportunities presented to them or have the ability to achieve them. So I'm really excited to be involved in this project and to do what I can to help these amazingly beautiful young girls in Africa.
And you've really dedicated 20 years of your life, to focus and champion supporting, educating and inspiring young women and girls in STEM programs. And you place such a high importance on that. Could you expand on why?
I do, because I think it's a 2-part answer to that. One part is that when I was young, I had no help. I had no mentors when I was younger. I had no role models. When I got my pilot's license at 17, I never saw another woman at all on the field. There were no other female students even. There were no female instructors. There were no women in the control tower. There were no women anywhere. And my flight instructor, who was an amazing, amazing guy, we're actually still in touch all these years later. He never said to me, oh, by the way, would you like to be a professional pilot? And here's how. I had no thought in my head that I could be a pilot. And, one of the reasons I do so much mentoring and outreach is so people don't struggle as I did. And of course, there was no internet back then, so you really didn't know what was going on in the world. But it's so important for men or women, anyone who's striving to do anything, to have help. I mean, it's just really, in a way, that basic. I do professional speaking as well. And one of the things I like to talk about as kind of a running theme in my keynote speech is I use a quote from Sally Ride, who of course was the first female American astronaut in space. Sally Ride once said, "You can't be what you can't see." And it's such a great concept because if young girls don't see women astronauts or female fighter pilots or female firefighters, it doesn't have to be in aviation, or young boys seeing, male nurses, which tends to be predominantly women, at least it used to be. If you don't see people that look and are like you in these fields, no matter which quote underprivileged area you may be in the world, you just don't have that inspiration and that thought. So, one of the things I love to do with outreach is connect other people. So as an example, I was president of Women in Aviation International in San Diego for about 4 years. And I had a young high school student come to me once and she said, I really can't decide if I want to be a Navy pilot or maybe an airline pilot. And I said, well, why don't I set you up to talk to one of each? And she was like, really? So I did. And, my good friend in the Navy went and met her, and she happened to be in a flight suit, which, helps a lot for image. But, girls tend to not always feel like they can strive to do whatever they dream of. And it's just so important for me to really help them. And, part of it also is because the percentages are so low.
Mhm.
Only 6% of all pilots in the world, licensed pilots, are female. And all the numbers are shockingly low. The lowest one is the percentage of women aircraft mechanics. I think it's a US number, not a worldwide number, but it's probably similar. It's 2%. So 2 out of every 100 aircraft mechanics are women. I mean, there's something wrong with that. And a lot of it is the way we're treated when we get into these industries, which we're all working on, this cultural issue. And the other part of it is a lot of girls just don't know that they can be that, and they don't know how to get there. So it's so important to me, just because there's nothing more rewarding than helping someone achieve their goal. And I'm usually mentoring 3, 4, 5 women at a time of different ages. And it really is my favorite thing. I wish it paid. I would do it full time. But so the reason why I do it really is it's just incredibly rewarding to help other people and to do whatever I can to let girls know that they really can, that, as we say in aerospace engineering, the sky is not the limit, and you really can reach whatever dream that you have and should go after it.
I want to touch on something, because you're also a member of a number of organizations that really focus on providing that support, networking, and equal opportunities and scholarships for women in the industry. And, to mention just a few, you're a member of the Society of Women Engineers and Women in Aviation International. And what I really want to ask you is that, are there enough female role models in the industry, and what can be done to engage more of them to come up?
There are a lot of role models, but I don't personally think we have enough of them. And one of the other things I do on the flip side of mentoring young women is try to encourage women already in the industry to get out there and be that role model. A lot of people in any industry, I have found in all of my running around, a lot of people don't think about becoming a role model or a mentor because they think it's too time consuming. They're always saying, oh, I'm too busy. But there's so many ways to be that role model. There's so many ways to be a mentor. And I do a lot of encouragement of other people in my sphere to try to get out more. And it can be, if you don't have time to be a formal mentor, with regularly scheduled meetings, which is great for some people, but not for most. You can be a role model by going and speaking at a school, which I did a lot in San Diego when I was there. If you just go to career day and stand up and talk about, what it's like to be an aircraft mechanic to a group of kids. So there's speaking at schools. There's, I did a speaking event at a museum once. It was a small museum in mid-California that has mostly World War II aircraft. And they do events like once a month on Saturdays. And I did a whole presentation on women in aviation. People were absolutely blown away by it. There were like 200 people there. I've spoken at other museums. I mean, there's so many ways to be a role model, and it doesn't need to take a lot of your time. And, again, it's just, all you have to do is light that spark, just that initial spark. And then if you have time to help people through the entire journey, that's great too. But, my point is, there's so many different ways to get up and be a role model. And I really wish more women would do it, because there's so many women that are doing amazing things in all of the industries that are underneath aerospace and aviation. There's so many different jobs, so many different slices of the career that anyone can strive to. And I also, would like men to be more role models and mentors to women. It doesn't have to be women, but obviously what I said earlier about if someone who looks like you and is the same gender gets up there, it tends to have a little more impact. So
looking at, just to expand on that, looking at the role of both women and men in guiding people on their journey, especially during this time where things are really uncertain, especially in aviation and globally as well. And I don't think you can get through an interview today without talking about COVID, because it has really impacted the lives of everyone. And what aspects from your personal life were affected, and in your professional life, how was that affected? And did you find some positives out of it, as we've heard from some people?
So COVID affected me personally, mainly in that a couple of friends I'm very close to did contract the virus. They survived. One of them almost didn't, but and just impact on the ability to see friends and family as everyone else was. Regarding professional, I actually had been working on a contract through my consulting firm. At the time COVID hit, I was working on it for almost 2 years. And it was a project to start a new commuter airline. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico now. We were trying to start a commuter airline for business passengers here in Albuquerque. And we ended up, unfortunately, COVID hit right as we were starting to look for investors. So when COVID first hit, the stock market also crashed shortly after. And the type of investors we were talking with just really couldn't support us at all. They had other more important things to worry about. So that contract actually was shut down. That entire project was shut down, and we never started the airline. So I was greatly impacted professionally by COVID. And although the industry, interestingly, the business aviation industry has actually gotten better in a way because of COVID, because there are many people who are not thrilled about the idea of being on a commercial airliner with 400 people they don't know, and would rather fly a small private jet or a turboprop if they could afford it. And, you know, COVID overall, as everyone's read in the paper, you know, with the airline shutdowns, it also stopped production at, you know, Boeing and Airbus, and it had this whole ripple effect starting to pick up, obviously. But the industry experts are saying that it won't be till 2024 or 2025 until the airline industry gets back to where it needs to be, which is really shocking. But the positives, you know, I've seen a little bit of what everyone else I think is experiencing, in that the idea that people can have a flexible work schedule and can work maybe part-time from home has really changed the whole business climate, I think. And the one conversation I had that really brought that to light for me was, I was talking to someone I know who owns a small company. And of course, as soon as COVID hit, everyone was working from home. And once people were at a high enough percentage of being vaccinated and they started being asked to go back to work, so many people said, no, I would like to keep working from home. And this business owner wanted to be flexible and accommodating. But her specific impact that I never thought of was, she said, you know, I own this company, I lease my office space. I can no longer afford to lease the office space because there's not as many people in it anymore, and has to go find an entire another facility that's smaller and get a new lease and, you know, make that massive change just because people are preferring to work from home. It's a piece of it I've really never thought about. I'm a huge fan of working part-time from wherever you're comfortable, whether that's at home or at a coffee house. So I think the positives to me have been, from a business side, obviously, I think businesses are thinking a little more, with a little more flexibility as to work environments and benefits to employees and what makes someone happy in the workplace. I mean, I know some people who are dying to get back to the office, and I personally am not a huge fan of working from home. So I would be one of those people wanting to be around others again. I'm very social, and my problem working from home is there's nobody here but me. That's the part I don't like about it. Zoom sessions are great, but they don't cut it on a daily basis. And then on the personal side, I think we've all gotten a little bit of a reset of perspective of the importance of friends and family. You know, when you don't see them for a long time and you have that restriction, or people close to you, you know, become very ill, it really kind of wakes you up about your own perspectives of what's important in life. You know, I think that's sort of made all of us think a little harder about that.
Jill, you've spoken about so many aspects of your career, and really they do touch a range of sectors in aviation. And I just want to ask you that, what advice would you give to young people who are looking to enter the industry today, you know, at a time where there's so much uncertainty? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say there's not as much uncertainty in aviation and aerospace because there's so many incredibly new and exciting things going on. Let's take them one at a time. In aviation, there's enormous efforts and many companies working on supersonic travel, working on hypersonic travel, working on electrically powered aircraft. And those are all moving forward and not at all impacted by what's going on with COVID. So there's a range of really exciting projects, including the entire remotely piloted, quote, drone space on the aviation side that people can be looking forward to if they're thinking of getting into the industry now. And of course, on the space side, we've all seen recently with the launches from Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic and the unbelievable, incredibly amazing successes of SpaceX, my personal favorite. SpaceX is doing phenomenal things. And there's so many really interesting projects and programs that kids or anyone of any age who's considering our industry can get into. And my biggest piece of advice, I really have two. My number one piece of advice, not to be repetitive, is to find a mentor. Finding a mentor is so important, really at any age. I mean, there's a young girl I've been surprisingly mentoring since I met her when she was 11 years old. She was already taking flying lessons at 11. I just posted recently on LinkedIn that 6 years later, she just went through an Air Force junior ROTC program that I recommended to her and helped her get into. And 2 weeks ago, she got her private pilot license after all these years of me helping her out. So you can find a mentor at any age. And my second recommendation, which is also a way to find a mentor, is, research all of these membership nonprofit organizations. And we've touched on a couple. There are so many organizations out there that can not only help you find a mentor, but who have, as we've talked about, scholarship programs, who have the ability for you to network and meet people, especially women, again, in all different kinds of jobs. I mean, Women in Aviation International is an example, and we do have student rates for students. We support and help women in any field. And I mean, if you look at the scholarship bucket, it's a really good representation of that. So we have what used to be an annual scholarship cycle. They're trying to do it more frequently now, which is great. But the annual scholarship cycle, we're in the middle of it right now. So the list of scholarships was posted in July. The deadline to apply, I believe, is October this year, mid-October. But if you look at the buckets of the kinds of scholarships that we're offering, there's flight training, there's aerospace engineering, there's aircraft dispatch, one of my favorite fields that no one even knows exists. Look it up, by the way, aircraft dispatcher. There's mechanics, there's airport management, you can be anything you want. And there's a scholarship for like almost all of it. So if you get into one of these organizations, you not only can meet amazing people who can help you, but you can learn a lot, through what they provide online, through conferences, through the magazine. It's just a huge educational burst at very low cost. I mean, Women in Aviation is $45 a year for a regular member and $32 a year for student members. So that's a nice little investment toward learning what all the opportunities are for people interested in these fields.
Jill, that's really fascinating. And I just want to say thank you for joining us here on AeroTime and for taking the time to share your story and passion for the industry.
Well, I'm glad you invited me to do so. It's been fabulous. Thank you so much, Michael.
I'm sure that our viewers are going to leave this interview with a spark of inspiration towards the industry. And really, that brings us to the end of this AeroTime interview, but stay tuned for more coming soon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Jonga, and you've been watching AeroTime. Goodbye.